Okay, my last lecture, well, this is a lecture on the Italian game, and I'm currently covering the Giuoco piano variation or line. And I covered basically what happens if white just plays naturally. Now I want to cover some ideas for white. Well, the two ideas I'm going to cover briefly in this 10-minute lecture are the Greco attack and the Evans gambit. And here they are. Basically, our Greco's attack. Basically, white sacrifices one or more pawns for development and an attack on the king. And the king is still in the center, so black's king is still in the center. Remember, what I originally said, one of white's goals was to rapid development and attack the king while still in the center, so what white's going to do is give up a pawn for that, one or more pawns. And then the Evans gambit, where white plays actually b4, a pawn sacrifice, followed by c3 and d4, so two pawn moves. Remember, white always wants to play d4, and then in the Italian game, I said one of the goals for white was to support d4 by first playing c3. So first what it's going to do is sort of going to deflect the bishop with a pawn sacrifice. And then for the pawn, white's going to get an attack and rapid development. So with the Greco attack, white's just going to continue. It's going to play c3, and then black's going to play knight f6, and then here's the Greco attack. White's just going to play d4. You're saying, well, hold on, doesn't this like lose a pawn? Well, yeah, we're going to sacrifice a pawn for what we want. Okay, so white just played d4, and then the natural sequence of moves are black takes the d4, white's going to take back, and then black is going to check the king. Okay, and white's going to play this move, and then black's going to take this pawn because it's for free. Black obviously white can't recapture because put the king in check. Now at this point, excuse me, white's going to castle. You got to ask yourself why. Well, if white just made some weird move, let's say just move the bishop here or something. Well, now white has a problem because if black plays this and then white retakes, black can retake with a fork with attacking king and rook. Okay, here's the problem though. So white castles, just to back up, or the bishop hadn't moved yet. Notice when black took this pawn here on e4, it opened this line up to its king. Okay, so white's going to try to use this. So black got this pawn, but now its king is still sitting in the center. Okay, so when we castle, we can easily move our rook over, and it's going to be looking right at the king. Okay, so white castles, and what is black going to do? Well, believe it or not, the best move for black, and probably the most commonly played move, is bishop takes c3. Probably a lot of people would play knight takes c3, or would play knight takes knight. And how this game would normally continue is that white would recapture the bishop, and then the move that probably most people would not see, but is very important if you're playing black, is to play d5. And remember, I said in my first lecture, this is usually the freeing move for black. Sometimes it's even a sacrifice, where black took a pawn on e4. Black may play the pawn up and sacrifice it. I mean, look what this move does. It's freeing this bishop here to get out. It's somewhat protecting this knight, and it's stabbing at this bishop. Notice how white just can't take the pawn, and remember I said that this was sort of a vulnerable thing here. Now black is sort of blocking it, you know, and black wants the castle right away. So this is a very important move if you get to this point. So if you get to this position, you know, play bishop takes knight, and let him take back and play this move. Okay, that's the most common sequence. So what happens when the other move, which you're probably going to see, is when black takes this knight. Notice one of the weaknesses or thing that's going to be a common thing is that this line is now open to the king. Okay, this is usually why black plays the bishop takes. So what happens now? Okay, sorry, I actually had to pause my my recorder. I wasn't too sure if I had actually played. I know I just covered when bishop takes, and then I can't remember if I left it at this position or where the knight actually takes. So remember I was saying we just covered when bishop takes. What happens when the knight takes? Well, the usual sequence of moves, this pawn takes and then the bishop takes. Okay, and then from here there's two usual continuations for white. Now notice that white is actually down 2 pawns at this point, but what in this opening is that white is giving up those pawns for an attack and for development. Okay, so now you can already tell that white can have an attack down here, you know, and white has 2 pieces out and can easily get out these 2 pieces. And what is black? Black has 2 pieces out too, but we're going to see that white can actually get a very good attack. You know, the most common moves are queen to b3 and bishop to a3. You're going, this looks suicidal because the rook is in take. I mean, white's already down 2 pawns. What the heck's going on? So it's just a continuation of black may take more material, but white's just going to get this very strong attack. First, let's look at queen to b3. Okay? First, I want to say if you're black, don't play this, because a continuation is not very nice. White takes, you know, check. The king's going to move here. I think if you actually move up, it's like mate and 10. It's a forced checkmate. So black has to move its king here, and then white plays this, getting out this bishop. And now sort of almost trapping the queen. So, and this isn't very nice. I think actually the best move for black is actually to take this pawn, as I believe. This gets very, if you don't know, this Greco's attack is very tactical. And as you can see, white has all of its pieces out in attacking formation. You know, white can easily move the rook to here, you know, and get a nice attack. So don't play bishop takes rook. What you want to do is play d5. Remember, I always says this is like the freeing move. Okay. So what's going to happen is that theoretically, you know, the queen could always take this bishop here, but then, you know, black's just going to take the bishop and the queen, and you'd probably come up with black would still be down a pawn, and then black's king can probably easily castle. But the usual continuation, which I sort of looked over with known lines and using a computer, are bishop takes, so white gets one of its pawns back, and then black castles. Okay, and then white's actually going to take this pawn, and then give check. The rook's going to take, and then white's going to play this knight here. If you think about it, this rook is sort of penned. But then black's going to play e6. And it looks sort of confusing what the actual correct move is. You know, it's like, well, should white play, you know, should white take here? Should it take here? You know, looks very tempting to take the rook, but the queen's in take. Just got to remember that. So the correct move actually is queen takes c3. Okay, and actually material is now even. That concludes. Oops. That really concludes the